Philadelphia Eagles fighting Nick Foles against the Chicago Bears. This is where Bears fans tune in and love us on YouTube and on the podcast. You know, I haven't checked our breakdown yet, but I'm assuming we still have all of our Chicago listeners.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
Still our number 2 city.
I have to check. Probably not. The best defense in the league, the Chicago Bears, taking on Nick Foles. If Nick Foles is going to pull this one off again, he's got to go through the best defense in the league.
Yeah.
In the Bears.
Yeah. The Foles thing is fascinating because, well, one, the prospect that he could actually repeat this ridiculous run that he had that went from being essentially an afterthought comedy backup quarterback to actually he just had probably the 2 greatest postseason games ever and won a Super Bowl. The idea that he could potentially repeat that is insane. The idea they're even in the postseason, given what needed to happen for them to make it, is pretty crazy.
What if he goes on a 4-game stretch here?
Right. But what's really fascinating is that he hasn't come close to the level he played at in the NFC Championship game or the Super Bowl. Those 2 games were like way in the 90s. They were basically as good as you're going to play. And so far, he's been pretty good, but he's been grading in the 70s, consistently in the 70s, which is actually remarkable for Nick Foles, to whom consistency is not a friend. But it's because we've talked before about how you can get anything out of Nick Foles from amazing to terrible, and you don't really know where it's going to land. At the moment, it's landed pretty consistently just north of average into reasonably good territory, which means that there's a ton of extra room to get better. Like, we could see this Nick Foles spectacular play come again, but obviously there's the looming specter of we could get this train wreck.
So let's do it from a number standpoint, okay? And we mentioned this a couple weeks ago, but Nick Foles playing really well under pressure. 90.6 passer rating under pressure so far this year. In his limited sample, that's number 1 in the NFL, just ahead of Deshaun Watson and ahead of Dak Prescott, guys that are playing this weekend. And again, if you guys have been listening to us, you know, hey, that fluctuates, right? That's volatile. Here's the on-field reason why it's volatile and why it fluctuates. I call it the Josh McCown factor. Okay. The Josh McCown obliviousness, the obliviousness quotient is what I like to say in the pocket. Josh McCown obliviousness quotient. In 2013, Josh McCown steps in there for the Bears, and he was making ridiculous throws in the pocket under pressure for the Bears. The Bucs go and sign him that offseason. They're like, oh, Josh McCown, he's going to be our guy. And he went from the best quarterback or one of the best under pressure to the worst. And he was doing the same thing. So the same throw where you're like, man, great job. Stood, looked down the barrel and made this great throw. And he took a hit and he dropped a dime in there. You're like, hey, great throw. It's not because he was tough or whatever. He just didn't feel where the pressure was coming from. And every now and again it works. And then you do the same exact thing. And you're like, how did you not feel that pressure? And you make the same throw, and this time you're just a little off, and it's intercepted. That's why pressure fluctuates. It's because you sit there, and there's certain guys who just don't feel pressure that well, and it works for them on some throws, and it works completely against them on other throws, and the result is essentially, random. That is Nick Foles so far this year.
Yeah.
If you look at some of the throws he's made, especially like in the fourth quarter, you're like, how did he get that ball down the field to Alshon Jeffrey? How did he do that? And the results have been absolutely fantastic. 66% of he's completing 66% of his passes under pressure, and a lot of them are down the field. That's crazy talk.
Yeah, and his downfield passing has been really impressive. He's got a pass rating of 103 on deep passes down the field. The one thing I think that he is really good at is being prepared to heave the ball down the field, knowing he is about to get murdered by somebody running right at him at full tilt.
Oh, he is.
To the point where
some of those plays have been really good.
To the point where he did it against the Rams, and you're like, that's Aaron Donald. If there's one guy that you might want to go, you know what, it's not worth it, I'm bailing on this one, it's Aaron Donald.
Yeah, so so that's where he's really good, and he's got some strength and he's got some arm strength to get the ball down the field. But I think this game comes down to, on this side of the ball at least, when he's pressured, when Khalil Mack gets there, he's got 69 pressures, he's healthy. When Akeem Hicks gets there, when those guys get pressure, does he stand in the face of it, and does the throw get to his receiver, or does the throw land in Roquan Smith's hands, or does it land in Eddie Jackson's hands? Does it land in the defense's hands?
I think that's the thing here is that the Eagles' offensive line, I think, might hold their own against Chicago's defensive front. As much as you've got Akeem Hicks, who wrecked the Vikings, you've got Khalil Mack, who can wreck anybody. The Eagles' O-line is still pretty good and might, I think, do a decent job. The problem is that over the past few weeks, Foles has been heaving these balls to Alshon Jeffrey, has been wide open or dominating smaller guys. The Bears actually have some legit coverage on the back end. So,
by the way, I know Eddie Jackson's banged up and potentially might not play.
Right. So this isn't going to be, free passes down the field the way it has been necessarily over the past few weeks. They're going to actually have to beat some relatively impressive coverage to get those opportunities. And if you're throwing it downfield just into a contested situation, I think they're going to be more contested or more fiercely contested than they have been in recent times. That could be the problem that derails this Philadelphia offense.
So, yeah, they're banking on some Foles magic. Alshon Jeffrey's been fantastic for him down the stretch. Anything else on this Bears defense? I mean, Akeem Hicks, it's funny, every time we put up an all-pro team, everybody gets in there with their favorite player, and this guy was snubbed. And we've seen some Akeem Hicks snub talk, and it's like, well, you have Aaron Donald and Fletcher Cox, and we'll talk about Fletcher Cox in a minute. I mean, those guys are the clear top two guys, but Akeem Hicks and Chris Jones from the Chiefs, they're in that next tier of just awesome this year, so they deserve credit.
Akeem Hicks has been a better player than a lot of all-pro players, just not at his position.
Yes.
His problem is there's just two better guys.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So Akeem Hicks, exceptional year for him. We know Khalil Mack coming off the edge. And, as we look back at the 2018 season, our free agent analysis on the Bears was, they really should just try to bring this secondary back, right? Prince Amukamara.
Yeah.
Fuller. Adrian Amos back there. We were like, hey, if you just bring the band back together, they'll be pretty good. And that's essentially what's happened.
Yeah. This is the only game of the weekend that isn't a rematch of some kind over this season.
Interesting.
That's a shame. That would have been a nice symmetry.
It would have been.
Every game is a rematch.
It would have been. I do have to say, I love a good,
rematch.
Cold weather playoff game in Chicago.
Yeah?
I do love that.
I hope it snows.
I hope it snows too.
I always like snow games.
Foles in the snow.
Anybody in the snow. Snow games are quality. I'm not going to listen to anybody who whinges about the impact it has on the football. Snow games are just better, period.
All right, I'm with you.
The end.
All right, let's go to the other side of the ball. The Eagles' defensive line, we have some numbers.
Still the best in the NFL.
By far.
Yeah.
As far as getting pressure goes.
They have 37 more total pressures than any other team in the league. They have the best win percentage, the best pressure rate, the best pass rushing productivity score. They are the best pass rushing unit in the NFL, despite Brandon Graham only getting 5 sacks on the year.
Why are you going to bring that up?
Because you lost the bet.
It's
and
like
I did.
5th in total pressures or something, too.
Yeah. My favorite was what happened when the chips were down,
Last week.
The game was on the line. Steve needs Brandon Graham to actually convert some of these pressures into sacks. And over the last 2 weeks, Brandon Graham got, what are we talking here? 14, 15, 17 total pressures and 0 sacks.
He is actually, so he has one more pressure than Khalil Mack. Granted, he's done it on a few more rushes. But the point is he's got 70 pressures.
Yeah.
Only 5 of which are sacks.
Right.
That is one of the lowest conversion rates you'll ever see. Which is why I bet that he would have 5 more sacks. I bet a lunch.
You did. The problem is he's always like that, and you probably should have seen that coming.
Except last year. He bucked the
right.
trend in
1 year.
And then they win the Super Bowl.
How many total pressures did you say he had?
70. 5 divided by 70.
Yeah, so actually that is pretty much his career baseline. It's 7. It's a conversion rate of 7.1%, and I think when I ran this before last season, his kind of baseline for his career was like 8%. So it's slightly worse than his baseline.
And his baseline is way below the average of like
his baseline is like
right?
half of the average. 15,
Is it 15?
For edge rushes.
Which is why I was banking on, there's no way this is that big of a trend with him. I'm banking on him reverting back to the average.
But my point was that that's his career baseline. That's probably where he's going to end up. And it turns out not only did he end up around there, he ended up the other side of it.
Well, because he's getting
good
pressure,
work, Brandon.
That allows guys like Michael Bennett to get sacks, Fletcher Cox to get sacks. That's what's happening.
Yeah.
So the Eagles...
Fletcher Cox is number 2 in the NFL in total pressures. If it wasn't for Aaron Donald again, that would be insane. Interior guys do not get pressure at the same rate as edge guys.
He has 17 more pressures than the next closest guy. So it's Aaron Donald with 106, Fletcher Cox with 95. They're both interior players. This number is supposed to be led by edge defenders. The first edge defender is D Ford with 78 and J.J. Watt with 75.
Right. This is a 310-pound guy getting what should be a league-leading number of total pressures. Only Aaron Donald is there as well.
Yep. So Fletcher Cox, he's got the second highest grade among all defensive linemen. Of course, he's 3 points below Aaron Donald, but pretty significant 92.6 grade for Fletcher Cox. By the way, Akeem Hicks, 91.7, our number 4 graded defensive interior player. And Hicks has 51 total pressures. So it's going to be this Eagles defensive line. Chicago offensive line's done a good job. And the story we've mentioned all year is that the scheme in Chicago has been fantastic. Mitch Trubisky's overall stats have been pretty good. He's running the ball extremely well. We trash Trubisky. That's all we do. But most importantly, he is playing well over these last few weeks, and he's throwing the ball much better and taking care of it much better.
Yeah, although every single one of these games seems to come with at least one clanking play that, torpedoes his grade. So it's like we would be grading him really well, only he keeps making one play a game. That's like, stop it.
Bad interception, fumble.
And so many times they don't show up in the box score. So it's like a negated, terrible interception.
But it does go back to what we said earlier in the year. If he does start playing better and making throws beyond the sticks, and moving the chains and all these different things that he's doing outside of the scheme, it makes them very dangerous because they've got Tariq Cohen, who has been as valuable as any running back in the NFL. It's pretty much him and Saquon Barkley from just a pure value standpoint. They move them all over the place. You have Allen Robinson who can make those contested catches. You have Trey Burton. Again, our preseason analysis, offseason analysis is all of these weapons merging together could potentially lead to a pretty good offense, and that's what we've had in Chicago.
Yeah, they're still one of the highest teams in the NFL in terms of RPO usage, those run-pass options. So this is one of the hardest offenses in the National Football League to defend because they show you everything.
Right.
And there's so much to have to deal with. They can run the ball up the middle with Jordan Howard, the way they did with the Vikings, just grind them out. They can hit Tariq Cohen on the edge. They can pass the ball to Tariq Cohen, give you matchup problems with him. You have to cover a legit number one in Allen Robinson. You have to deal with these RPOs, the fact that they show you 3 different things to have to defend at any one time. This is just a really hard offensive system to shut down because you have to cover so many different things all at once, and there aren't that many defenses that can do that.
Yeah, so I think what I'm looking at here, though, is the way Trubisky plays under pressure. Because a lot of times when he faces pressure, I feel like a lot of quarterbacks are doing this. Deshaun Watson does it sometimes. Russell Wilson does it sometimes. You're taught not to drop your eyes, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of quarterbacks who are playing right now, and Trubisky does this. He drops his eyes and he says, okay, let me navigate the rush first. I'm going to navigate the rush first, get out of the pocket. And then when he gets out of the pocket, sometimes he's looking to throw. He's probably not looking to throw as much as a Russell Wilson or a Deshaun Watson, but he'll run, and he's got 29 first downs picked up with his legs. He's third in the league with 421 yards as a scrambler behind Josh Allen and Deshaun Watson. So I'm curious to see is when he faces pressure, is he going to try to navigate the pocket, get outside, or is he going to make throws in the face of pressure because his PFF grade drops about 25 points as a passer when he's facing pressure?
Yeah, how much pressure the Eagles' defensive front can actually get on him is a big thing, and then how well their coverage holds up on the back end is, I think, the thing that's been defining their entire season. Is everybody got hurt, and they were forced way deep into the bench, and guys that had no business starting were being put out there and getting just destroyed, and it was going extremely ugly. So 2 things have happened. One, the guys that were hurt have started to come back and actually obviously improve the talent level. 2, the guys that were thrown into the fire have started to be tempered a little bit. Those guys have actually been, forged by the fire that they were thrown into and have become better players because of the beating they took.
Right.
This idea that you only get better by playing people better than you. Well, those guys have been playing people better than them all through the season, so they've gotten a lot better.
Yeah.
So the Eagles' the coverage is much better now than it was earlier in the season. And I don't know if it's good enough to be able to overcome all these things, but it's at least got to the point where it shouldn't be, eviscerated. And the reason they're losing games immediately right off the bat.
That's fair. So can the Eagles secondary hold up?
Yeah.
Is the big question. Where are you going with this one?
Chicago, home team.
I've
only taken one road team, I think.
Yeah, I'm taking Chicago as well. Okay. I do think that defense slows down the Foles train too much. They're just too much. They make things difficult. Makes for some really, really great divisional matchups as well if they have to travel. If Chicago wins, they definitely play the Los Angeles Rams. That's the one matchup that's locked in. If the Bears win, that's who they play. If the Eagles win, they definitely play the Saints. But Bears-Rams rematch, but in Los Angeles, could be a really good one. Not that I'm looking ahead. We take it one game at a time here.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
We're taking the Bears, the Trubisky train. We're riding it. How about that, Bears fans? Riding the Trubisky train, at least for one more week.